you for coming. My name is John Albers. I serve in the Georgia State Senate for District 56, and I'm honored to chair the study committee for Senate Resolution 275, which is expanding Georgia's workforce. This meeting came about by the priority and support of our Lieutenant Governor, Burt Jones, who came to me earlier this year and had a passion about making sure that we had the workforce to match the needs of our businesses as well as our governments in the future. And he appointed this committee through legislation, and we're going to have the committee members in a moment to introduce themselves very briefly. And then we'll also hear from some folks who are helping with the logistics of this from the Senate press office, recognize the different individuals we have in a working committee, and then we're going to have Brad with the Lieutenant Governor's office also address us. But first, I'd like to begin toward one end of the table. We've got our senator who represents this area. He is the majority whip for the Georgia Senate. I'll turn it over to Randy Robertson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'd like to welcome everybody here for what I feel is an extremely important study committee hearing. I'd like to welcome my fellow senators so that they have the opportunity to come and visit the absolute best district in the state of Georgia. And I do want to remind them that if they don't think it is, then we can introduce them to the law enforcement and the community on their way out. And I'm extremely pleased that where we're at today here. Kia is a huge part of District 29, along with the partnership with West Point and LaGrange. I think they have set the example of workforce development and also of community engagement. It's one of the most pleasant parts of the district that I represent. They tend to hold my feet to the fire with leadership like Stuart and others here that see not only the responsibility of Kia to the business side, but the responsibility of Kia to the community side. And they have done an incredible job. But while you're in the district, I think everybody has my cell number. Please feel free to call me. I'm excited about this, especially under the chairmanship of my dear friend and sweet mate, Chairman John Albers. And let's have a great meeting. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator. And we'll just continue down. Champ, we'll just do a quick introduction.
Right. Champ Bailey, Hall of Famer, entrepreneur, philanthropist. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Ryan Pernice. I own 3 restaurants up in Roswell, Georgia, Table in Maine, Osteria Matone, and Casa Robles.
Sorry, Joe McDermott, Delta Airlines, and I appreciate the invite and participating in this. Thank you.
Greg Dozier, Commissioner of the Technical College System of Georgia.
Good morning, Daniela Perry, Vice President with the Georgia Chamber of Commerce.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Billy Hickman, Senate District 4, which is all of Evans, all of Candler, all of Bullock, all of Effingham, and about 40,000 people down in the Chatham County area. And Senator Robinson, thank you for allowing us to be in your district today. Thank you.
I'm glad y'all are okay. No, thank you. Jason Estevez, State Senator for Senate District 6, Northwest Atlanta, parts of Cobb and Fulton County.
Good morning, Dave Williams, Metro Atlanta Chamber. I'm Senior Vice President for Public Policy and Talent.
Good morning, Brandon Beach, State Senator from District 21, which is North Fulton, Alpharetta, Milton, and Cherokee County. I also serve as Chairman of Economic Development and Tourism, so workforce is a very important issue to us. Thank you.
Well, as you can see, Lieutenant Governor Jones appointed quite the august committee. We're very proud of the work that's been done. A little bit of background. This is our 3rd committee meeting. The first one we started with a kickoff in Atlanta. Thank you to Georgia Power for hosting us there. And then last month we were fortunate enough to be in Savannah. And then obviously after this meeting here in Kia, we're going to be going up to Commerce, Georgia in September. And then we will be going to Dalton, Georgia in October, and we will round off our final committee meeting in November, which will be back at the Capitol, at which point we will have a report prepared for this committee that we will review in detail and get everybody's hopeful agreement on. I feel confident. And we will then submit that back to the Lieutenant Governor in his office, which we hope will then push forward with potential legislation and/or budget items for the areas we feel can help to fill this important gap. Also want to take a moment to have a very special introduction to Ms. Allison Bailey right here. This is her 4th day with the Senate in the state of Georgia. She's got it all figured out, but we're very excited to have her here. She just finished up her graduate program at Emory University, as well as did her undergrad at Alabama. Go ahead, groans. I'm waiting for it. But we're very happy to have her here. She's actually going to be supporting both myself and Senator Robertson. At this time, I'd like to ask Mr. Brad Vaughn come up to the microphone, and he is going to give us some updates from Lieutenant Governor's office. Brad?
Chairman Albers, thank you so much, and for all of you who are here, thank you for your participation in the committee. As the chairman said, this was a passion project from the very beginning from the Lieutenant Governor's office. He took office in mid-January, and as you sort of know, when you are new, everybody wants to come talk to you about everything that they're doing and everything that they're successful at, and then they also want to bring in a few complaints here and there. I wouldn't call those so much as complaints as, guys, we have a really, really great problem that we need your help solving. Our state economy is growing. We are busting at the seams with new companies wanting to come to Georgia. How are we going to find our workforce? And as Senator Albers alluded to, that was really the genesis of this study committee. The members who were selected, the various groups from around our state who were also represented on the committee from various industries, various parts of our state. So we did this very intentionally. We very much wanted to hear from all of you about what you have to bring to our committee, and then particularly from the people we've invited to present, along with Chairman Albers. We want to hear from a cross-section of people who have success stories to share, but people who also have some ideas about ways to make it easier for people to get into our workforce. This committee is one of several in the off-season from the Senate side, and then also some joint committees with our colleagues in the House that are looking broadly at how do we make it easier for someone in Georgia to get a job. And that fundamental question, I think, is going to guide a lot of our work as we go forward. That's a question that the Lieutenant Governor has kind of put before us in the off-season as a staff, put before us in the Senate, as well as to say, guys, we need to make it easier that if somebody wants to get into the workforce here, we should not be the ones standing in the way of them doing that. And that is going to drive a lot of our work going forward. So I'm particularly happy today that we're going to be hearing from some folks in our building trades, also some representatives from our state government, from our local governments. Those are big employers in our state as well, and we want to make sure that all of the opportunities that we can make available for someone to start a career in public service, to use a career in public service, to launch a career in industry, in really any part of our economy, we want to make sure that those opportunities are available. So I will share with you, too, one of the other things that I'm looking forward to is that Lieutenant Governor Jones will be personally joining you all for your final meeting of the committee in November at the state capitol. We've been working very closely with Chairman Albers to look at potential legislation for next year, also looking at some recommendations for our committee that may drive other areas of state government, not necessarily ones that require legislation, but just ones where we've been able to find ideas that are working, that we can help connect people and get them together so that those successes can be shared. So again, thank you so much for your participation, for going all over the state with us this summer and into this fall. We think it's a wonderful opportunity to showcase things that are happening, things that need to happen, but also for your commitment to this very important issue. And again, thank you to our hosts from Kia for making this beautiful facility available to us. Senator Robertson for hosting us in your district. It's always a pleasure to see you, sir. And please, by all means, if we can ever be of any assistance to you in the Office of Lieutenant Governor, please let us know. We are here to be a resource for the Senate, for the General Assembly, and for anyone who knocks on our door. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, and the partnership has been extraordinary, and thank you for all the work that you and the Lieutenant Governor's office has done to support us through this process. Next, I'm going to ask Lexi to come on up real quick. She is our interim director of the Senate Press Office and helped set up all the stuff that you're going to see from websites to live streaming, et cetera. So you give us a quick update, Lexi, on what everybody can leverage from communications.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. Good morning, committee members. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. So we've got our website currently pulled up on the screens here. It's at expandinggeorgiasworkforcestudy.com. This is a micro website that we've set up to help people follow along with the work of the committee. So I wanted to just point out one quick feature change. We've actually added some new a new feature, a new capability on our website. If we scroll down on this page, thank you, Ole from Kia is helping us in the back. We've got all of our past meetings here linked on the website. So if you haven't had a chance to attend all of the committee meetings before, if you'd like to go back and reference anything that was said, any presentations, those are linked here in this past meeting section. We've also got photos from the committee meetings where we've been covering those. And we're also very soon going to have all of the presentations actually that speakers have presented to the committee available in the original PowerPoint format on the website as well. So that is coming soon. And as far as anything else, I think that kind of brings us up to speed. I see a lot of familiar faces, and I'm sure y'all have been checking us out. So yes, expandinggeorgiasworkforcestudy.com is where you can do that. Back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Lexi. And if you have any further questions, please grab either Lexi or myself as the meeting ends today so we can assure that you have any information you may need. Okay, we're going to begin, and I'm going to ask Stuart Countess to come up with Kia. He is no stranger, I think, to most of us here who has just been a tremendous leader and ambassador for Kia. And I want to take a moment as you're coming up and getting settled to also thank April and Shelby for their amazing work that they have done to pull all this together. This is a beautiful state-owned facility which was designed and built specifically to support and be in partnership with the great work that Kia has done and the jobs that have been created and the impact of the community. And Stuart, I want to just personally and professionally thank you for your incredible service, and we will turn it over to you for your presentation.
Well, fantastic. Again, welcome to everyone. Senator Albers, we're grateful to have your committee here in West Point and in Troup County. I think you'll see, for those of you that are able to take the tour this afternoon that will be offered, what growth has meant to this community. And if you go back and reflect where we were some 14, 15 years ago, it's a very different environment. For those that are unable to attend the tour, please reach out to us. We'll gladly get you through this facility and show you what progress can be made with such facilities. You know, the origins of Kia really started in this building. This is where the first workforce was trained. And 4 million cars later, we're still producing. We made the announcement in April that we would build the first electric vehicle in the state of Georgia out of this facility. That vehicle is actually, a representative of it is out in the parking lot. We encourage you to go by and take a look at what the future of Georgia is going to be. When you look at where certainly the Savannah plant as part of our larger Hyundai Motor Group, if you think about that operation, certainly Rivian and ourselves, the state of Georgia will be producing over 1 million cars by somewhere around 2026, 2027. That's a vast change from 2009 when we made the first car here after an exodus period. That does not include the battery facilities that also exist in this state because without them we can't be successful. So I say that because the growth opportunities are tremendous for the workforce. But obviously the question is, where do we get those individuals from? We as a company focus in 3 pillars, basically, about community development, about workforce development and education. And workforce development and education are not independent pieces. We believe in work-based learning. We've had great successes with that, whether it be through college and career academies or through base schools. There has been a tremendous amount of progress made. What we see is young minds who don't really maybe know what they want to do coming out of high school. But we're open of how do we help you decide what that career can look like, whether it's going to the technical college system led by Commissioner Dozier or through the USG system and gaining those educational credits and validations to come in and be a high contributor within an organization. But I also say this because there's another pathway. 26% of my engineers have no engineering background. These are people who started off on an hourly base and have worked their way through the system to become an engineer, truly leading engineering functions, doing problem solving, analytics, working in a team environment. If you look in our HR admin areas, our finance and other support structures, also equivalent numbers of people who started off at a very different level and have found a pathway to greater success. We try to teach this because we think it's important, especially in the change of environment today. That is not a knock against higher education by any stretch. But our company and many others within the state, and working with the Georgia Chamber, we've heard a lot of comments that we just want a chance to show you what we can do. And there are successful careers out of it. My example, quick story on this is we had a couple of students that came through our expeditions program. I talked to one of those individuals at the very beginning, asked him what he was going to do. He was going to go get a mechanical engineering degree at Auburn. I had to talk to him about that a little bit, as I'm an Alabama graduate. But at the end of his term, I went back and talked to him again. What are you going to do? Well, I'm going to go to the technical college and get my 2-year degree. That young man is now working in our maintenance department, knocking north of 6 figures. He's 24, 25 years old now, but he found a different way to success, and he loves his job. Another individual that came in also out of that same expeditions program taught people in the paint shop who'd been working in there for 30 years how to think differently. Now, it's incumbent upon us as an employer and people within a company to listen to different ideas, but we have to engage those individuals. There's a colleague that's with the Georgia Association of Manufacturers. She came up with a term, and I've kind of latched onto it, and it talks about the 4 Ds. The 4 Ds in manufacturing are that it's dull, dead-end, dangerous, and dirty. I challenge anybody when you go through our factory to tell me any one of those are possible. But we have to dispel that rumor, because what we have coming, certainly within the state of Georgia with these factories that I've talked about, there is a need. But we have a career, if you'll just let us help you get to that career. You will define how far you want to go in that career, but we're here to help you. We do that through providing tours for students at the high school level. We also do it at 8th grade level. Certainly COVID impacted that, and we were unable to do it for a period of time, but those are back open, and we'll take any school throughout the entire state to come and see what we do here. And I think you'll find that open doors to a lot of companies in the state of Georgia. I think one of the critical things, though, that we need to have conversation about, and there is much conversation already in the state, is about externships for teachers. We have got to find a way to help educate our educators about what opportunities exist in the state of Georgia. That message does not always get there very clearly, and without that, they can't help guide students to what a successful career looks like, especially for those young individuals who maybe don't know whether they want to go for further education. There are ways to do that. We've run some programs in the local area through former Mayor Jim Thornton, through the LaGrange Industrial Fellowship of Teachers. The idea behind it was to bring them in, let them experience 3 or 4 days or a week, understanding what we could do, and take those concepts back to the students and help guide them into a direction that suits their needs. COVID certainly put an impact on that, but we have got to re-engage that at a state level, and it's a year-long process. I've been very open that I'm not running a summer school program. We are open 48 weeks out of the year. The other weeks we're doing work on site of the facility. But I think, again, you'll find a lot of companies willing to take educators in and help them understand what we do. We also have done some initiatives to try to reach individuals at a different place, just like Champ Bailey with the signing day. There's a lot of neat programs out there where we're making it a big event that child, young person can turn a hat around and say, well, I'm going to work for Kia, I'm going to work for Lockheed Martin. It's a different way of connecting, and that's what we have to be open also to do. How do we connect with people? It's taking other people's success stories into the environments and letting them share where they were in their life and where they are now. I can tell that all day long, but I might have an issue of reaching them at their particular place. So there are different concepts that are out there. We're finding some success in those, and we'll continue to work on them. Lastly, I will say there's 2 great programs that we have supported through our community efforts. One is called A World in Motion. This is teaching soft skills, but also teaching problem solving skills and teamwork to 5th graders and through the elementary school. And then Green Power USA. Green Power USA is a program that the state of Georgia has really been a leader in. One of the middle schools here in the local area is the national champion in that, and it's basically building an electric go-kart. Well, how fitting is that for what we're doing right now? But it also is amazing to see the participation from parents, grandparents, siblings, and other individuals coming to watch what these young minds can do, which is problem solving and helping each other be successful. So we're glad to have you here. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Stuart. Quick question. Currently, as far as pipeline to meet the current open jobs do you have, how are you doing with having the necessary folks to fill your positions that are open?
So our current open positions actually is back to some pre-pandemic levels. We would have on the hourly side about 75 open positions. That sounds like a large number, and yes it is, but it's a kind of a turn that always is happening. We had to make some adjustments in some of our own processes from shift work, recognizing changes in the economy, et cetera, and those things have helped. But we are finding success at recruiting individuals who maybe don't know what they want to do for further education now.
Fantastic. Are there other questions from the committee members for Stuart? I got a question from Champ.
Great point. What age do the kids start the Expeditions program?
They are typically junior, senior is what we have been experiencing, but there are some things that we're working around just because we're in industrial manufacturing, and we found successful solutions for them.
Okay. And how long does the program last, and what's the success rate?
Three semesters. 3 semesters that they're able to attend that.
Okay. And it's been pretty successful?
Absolutely, it has been great.
Other questions?
Mr. Chairman. Stuart, I know y'all have made a huge investment in K-12 education and building those relationships with your K-12 partners. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how important that is, especially when you're trying to maybe dispel some misinformation and really build those long-term pipelines that will last.
Yeah, so the AWIM program was actually begun about 12 years ago. To date, we estimate that we've reached 90,000 students. We realized actually there's a yearly competition, and it took place in Columbus this year, and we realized that the kids that were at that event that day were not born when we started. Now what that tells us is that the original people in that program were now some of the employees that we had. So to date, we've put over $3.6 million into it. We will continue to put money into it because it, again, is teaching soft skills that arguably is really a challenge. How do you work inside a team? How do you listen to other people's opinions? How do you problem solve and take analytics? I would encourage any one of you to, next year, if you wish, to come to the competition and just stand back and watch what actually happens amongst 5th grade students. The joy in what they do and how they learn is a different way of learning. It's not textbook learning, but it is learning, and it is valuable for what they can develop into a career. The teacher aspect of that, I think, is also quite amazing. We find out that the teachers don't really understand that this is a different way to teach also, but it's helping them to understand, what a potential career could look like, even at a very early age.
Thank you, Daniela. Other questions? Senator Beach.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have funded for the construction industry, the C.W. Matthews and the road construction. We funded 58 simulators. We're in 15 high schools, and they've hired over 300 people. Would there be an opportunity for us to do anything for high schools, for the auto industry to do simulators or do something to make that a position that these young kids from 8th, 9th, 10th grade would want to get in these simulators of some sort and try to say, hey, I want to be in that business, be in that industry?
Yes. We would agree that that's in a way to attract young minds to what futures can look like. We have been for a number of years through the local college and career academy called Think. We've put robotics into those settings, again, trying to teach young individuals how to read PLC logic and work in those environments and encourage them what a career could look like.
Just a follow-up, how many high schools do you have within I guess, a 30, 45-mile radius from here?
That's a really good question. There's 3 in Troup County, but there's probably in total, and this would be, I guess, about 15 to 18 that we have pretty regular interactions with. They're usually the ones that are also coming for the tours, but we do recruit any of those the local ones, Troup, Hurd, Meriwether, Troup, and one out of Alabama we also look at. But we provide them the opportunity to work in this environment and gain some experience. It's up to them. If they want to come with a career, we have tuition reimbursement programs and try to help them develop that. I would also say with the technical college system, we now have a maintenance certification program through West Georgia Technical College that was originally developed by Georgia Quick Start, and then we passed it off once we were successful in that. And we have grown internal talent, but also encourage external, that this is a certificate you could go and pursue if you wish.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, Stuart, thank you again for your tremendous hospitality and leadership. And I know that several folks here will be taking the tour after lunch today. Thank you.
We look forward to seeing you.
All right, next up, one of my favorites here, Mrs. D'Arcy Robb with the Georgia Council on Developmental Disabilities. And why she's coming up, I don't like that word. I use the word special needs and gifts. You might be thinking, well, why are we hearing from an organization that supports folks with special needs? Because they're a huge part of our community and can fill a host of important jobs using those very special gifts and needs that they have. We were proud to work together on a study committee just last year of how we can better support our population and our families. So I'm going to turn it over to you to tell us about how we can meet some of the workforce needs with this important part of our community.
Great. Thank you so much, Senator. Move this a little closer. And thank you for that introduction. Members of the committee, I am thrilled to be speaking to you about this topic here today. As the Senator said, I'm D'Arcy Robb. I'm the Executive Director of the Georgia Council on Developmental Disabilities. I'm going to be speaking to you about 2 talent pools today, and those are Georgians with disabilities and their family caregivers. Ooh. I may need some technical assistance on the slides here. Maybe user error. Thank you.
There we go.
Very good. Thank you. All right. So at GCDD, we are a federally funded state agency. We are self-governing, and we're charged with identifying the most pressing needs of folks with developmental disabilities here in Georgia. As you can see on the slide there, as per our establishing legislation, over 60% of our members must be people with developmental disabilities or their family members. And when I say developmental disabilities, I mean a developmental disability manifests before age 22. It is significant. It is lifelong. It's not something you would recover or be cured from, and it can impact you in a number of ways of living, such as your mobility, your ability to learn, communicate, care for yourself. So it can look a lot of different ways. Our mission is to bring about social and policy changes that promote opportunities for folks with developmental disabilities and their families to live, learn, work, play, and worship in Georgia. Now, getting down to the nitty-gritty, I told you I was going to talk about talent pools, and those are our folks with disabilities as well as their family caregivers. Let's start by talking about myths. So my question for y'all today, how is the idea of unemployable due to a disability like a unicorn? Well, I've got the spoiler right there on the slide for you. They're both myths. If you take one thing away from what I say to you today, please let it be this. No one is unemployable due to a disability. There are folks who believe this myth. It is slowly dying, a lot more slowly than I would like. But the reality is we can look at every person, we look at their gifts, we look at their talents, we look at what they do, and then we match those up with what's actually needed in a job. And that can look a lot of different ways. That could look like supported employment. So let's say that I have a job coach who helps me learn my job, stay on task. Let's say that a company has something that's not being done. We could customize a job for me. A lot of great jobs have been found by going to CEOs and saying to them, hey, what's your biggest headache? And then you think about, okay, do I know anybody who could solve that headache? I'll give you an example. There's a young woman by the name of Lindsay down in South Georgia. The Speaker of the House and I did a visit to her place of employment some years ago. She works at a company that makes airplane parts. The CEO of that company shared with us that because of Lindsay, he sleeps better at night. The reason is because she single-handedly digitized all of the blueprints for all of the parts they have made. Before that, all of those blueprints existed in a warehouse. If there had been a fire, I don't think I need to tell you how catastrophic that would have been, because the FAA requires when you make an airplane, you hold on to those blueprints at least as long as that plane is flying. So, don't believe the myth. There are people who haven't figured it out how to support a person with a disability, but that does not mean that they cannot have a meaningful career. So what is the reality? Well, the reality is that Georgians with intellectual and developmental disabilities do want jobs. They want to work, and most of them don't. And this is where I really want to draw attention. We have a workforce problem in this state. Well, guess what? Part of our solution is sitting right here. Only 13% of Georgians with intellectual and developmental disabilities, now this is according to the National Core Indicators, that's a very well-respected source of data, only 13% have a paid job in the community. 13%. However, 54% of those who do not have a paid job in the community want a job. I'm not sure if there is another community that has such a high percentage of people who are not employed and who want to be. There is golden opportunity right here. So, furthermore, employment services benefit the economy. I'm not going to go through every one of these bullet points with you, but this comes from a well-known researcher, Robert Samara. When we as the taxpayers invest in employment services for people with disabilities, we get a positive return on our investment. Now, why is that? When people go to work, they become taxpayers. And many times their other support needs actually diminish because they're plugged into their community. We all know about the social determinants of health. One of the big ones is having a job, having all the benefits that results from that. So what can we do about this? Several suggestions for you today. Number one is we can aggressively push employment first policies and procedures. And what employment first means is that we look at a job in the community or running their own business. We look at that as the first option for how a working age Georgian with a disability should spend his or her day. And we make sure to align funding practices, training practices with that. Number two, we can consider state as a model employer. I've got a website link for you there. Now, this is a policy that several other states around the country have adopted, essentially where the state sets itself out to be a model employer for folks with disabilities, adopt best practices. Number three, we can encourage employers. We've got some business folks here represented. You all may already be familiar with this resource, Disability In. They have a fantastic resource library of how to best hire and support employees with disabilities. Now, I don't want to skip over family caregivers. Senator Albers mentioned the committee we did last year. I want to tell you all that after every single one of those meetings, a family member would come up to me and would say, I would love to go back to work, and I just can't, because their loved one, usually their child, just didn't have support. I had one of my staff pull some statistics on this morning. There's not a whole lot, but what she did find is from the National Institutes of Health in 2015 that found 51% of parents of children with intellectual disabilities or autism had had to leave work. So what can we do on this end? Number one, again, we encourage employers to take advantage of resources and best practices for employees who are caregivers. And number two, we want to support funding for this community. Particularly, we're thinking about the DBHDD rate study and the now comp waivers. And the reason I raise that, it goes back to why all those family caregivers told me they couldn't work, that when Georgians with developmental disabilities have adequate support, it's actually a multiplier of an investment, because you've got the direct impact on them and their caregivers, and you're also supporting both groups to enter and excel in the workforce. Summing it all up, tapping these talent pools benefits families, businesses, and Georgians with disabilities. I thank you so much for letting me speak to you. I would love to have follow-up conversations with any and all of you. and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Darcy. A question from Senator Hickman.
Yeah, a couple of quick questions. And my wife Joanne sitting here. She worked for an organization when we first got out of school, got out of college, and it was a vocational rehab and all, and so she was in charge of placing people. But my question was, the 13 and 54%, all those are great, but what's the numbers of those?
That's a great question. It's in the hundreds. I don't have those exact numbers, but I can follow up with those by email, Senator.
I think I agree with you, and I know we see more and more businesses that are kind of zoning in on helping people with disabilities and all. So I think particularly in Savannah, there's a restaurant that I think everybody that works there had I forget what some type of disability. But yeah, if you give us those numbers, I think that'd help us kind of relate a little bit more and kind of zone in on it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you.
Other questions for Darcy? Seeing none, thank you for your presentation. Please thank Charlie Miller as well. We appreciate all the great work you tag team together, and we'll look forward to following up with you soon.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Darcy. Okay, next up, Zach Fields with Construction Ready. Always excited to see Zach. We've known each other for a long time in his work both in education as well as through the Rotary Club, my Rotary Club in Roswell, Georgia. And I'm excited as he continues to do great things in his industry. So, Zach, we're going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Senator. I'm going to put my stopwatch on right now. Here we go. Timer is on. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to take the first minute or so to tell Darcy, thank you for fighting for that population of people. The genesis of my journey here to where I am today started out of the special education classroom at Roswell High School for 7.5 years, and I saw firsthand the talent that these young men and women have, and they deserve an opportunity. And that's a lot of it. What I'm going to talk about today is we have the talent here, much like the special needs population in our state. A lot of our talent is in the K-12 system where we can currently help them and better connect them to the opportunities that come after that. And so you'll see that as a common theme. What I'm going to discuss today is we're going to review the culmination of around 4 years of work that Construction Ready has done. We are a workforce nonprofit that was formed by the construction industry in the state of Georgia in 1993. And so we've been at this 30 years or so, primarily in that intermediary space, that space between industry and education that can operate in both. And I think that as we look for solutions across multiple industries today and in the future, keep in mind that intermediary role that can be a connector between both those spaces. That's going to be an important one. So let's start with where we need to get to and what our workforce looks like today. We're just over 200,000 construction employees in the state of Georgia with 25,000 plus employers. Many of those are small business to mid-sized businesses, 10 employees or less. And of course, you got the larger ones that we're pretty well familiar with. And we have great associations like AGC Georgia, my colleague Mark Woodall here that represents many of those and also a great supporter of our work. Construction in the state of Georgia contributes $33 billion to the state GDP. It is 4.4% of our state economy. I think it plays a larger role in that, though. As we attract new businesses to the state of Georgia, no one can truly expand if they need facilities or infrastructure without having adequate labor supply in the construction industry. So we are very interdependent with other industries, but that also means we have even more opportunity for our young people and really our citizens across the state to jump into this industry and to play a part in developing their community. $17.5 billion in wages delivered this past year. A few challenges that you'll see here. Materials costs have gone up 20%. So we have a labor shortage, and we thought things might possibly slow down during COVID. As you all know, people got tired of sitting in their homes and decided to build more. That was good for us, but also it didn't help with the shortage. We have 3-year demand that we get from the Construction Labor Market Analyzer that puts construction demand for employees in Georgia at 380,000 plus. And just to contrast that, we're currently at 220,000, and we lose around 5% every single year due to separation. A lot of that's the retirements. You hear about the aging workforce. So when we take into account the retirements and just the other separations, we actually have a gap of 200,627 workers that we need in the next 3 years to keep up with current demand that's on the books, and to really keep our promise as a state when we attract new business here in a mega project, that we can deliver not only the workforce to run that business, but the workforce to build that business on the front end, and that's a key issue we're working on. This is just more for reference, but you can see diesel has gone up from $2.53 a gallon in 2020 to $4.24 today. That is driving prices up everywhere and on construction sites. And I wanted to bring up these material increases because these are impacting our skilled trade programs at the K-12 level. So consumable budgets for these programs at the K-12 level are often provided through the local school system, local district. I don't know what we can do about it at the state level, but they were already low coming into this, and now those costs have increased 20%. So they are suffering. They're cutting up pallets behind the school, many are, to have the material they need. We're working on it. Here's a snapshot of then and now. So we've come a long way. In 2019, Construction Ready received philanthropic investment that really took our operation to the next level, and that's a lot of the reason why we actually have this data, and you can see the results here. But we wanted to contrast that. We were taking a look. In 2018, we tracked 429 students coming out of the K-12 programs taking a next step to our industry. Since then, that number has reached 711,000 plus. In those few years. So we're up 1,200, 1,400 students a year now coming out of the trade programs in K-12, taking a next step. We run programs that incentivize this, and we keep teachers' eyes on the ball on this, and that includes technical college programs, apprenticeship programs. Any next step out of K-12 where a student is on a career path, we count that and we track that. You can see leveraged funding. So I know that as legislators, everybody's always asking you for money. We've captured some of the investments the legislature has contributed to the workforce effort so far that has helped to get us here. We're very thankful for that. You can see the heavy equipment operation simulators from last session here, Connect Grant equipment. All of these state-funded programs, we align with key workforce impact criteria to bring the necessary alignment to the front lines. If you all know, our school systems are a big bureaucracy, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. There's strengths to that and there's weaknesses, but you have to make sure the impact gets to the front lines and happens between the teacher and the student. Otherwise, it gets washed out despite the best of intentions. These programs get funding directly to the front lines and tie workforce impact key metrics where the school system is tracking and reporting and making increases in that. You can see as well, the philanthropic world has contributed to our workforce strategies and efforts since 2018 at $9.1 million. And that's not only because they care about the construction industry, it's really because they care about people and the career path for people. And that's the bigger issue here that we want for Georgians. And our construction workforce has increased to 220,000 from 190K since 2018. And that is with around 10 to 12,000 people leaving a year. So these efforts have been overall successful. We're just not where we need to be yet. At a high level, we're focused on opening new programs in the K-12 space, more trade programs, and we go all the way down to elementary school for the reasons I think we heard. You have to reach students earlier. Their parents are more impressionable. The students are more impressionable, and you really unlock learning at that age. You learn by doing, and that's in 3 words, learn by doing, really sums up what this program is and how it unlocks the learners that are in the schools that aren't feeling successful having to stay in a desk or, do things that, out in the academia space, but when they can apply their learning, they're learning their fractions, they're learning how to measure, they become those engineers. And you can see here that we've got a few challenges that those programs have I just want to lift up as we're looking at things. Our grant timelines from the time the session ends to they do not align with hiring decisions being made. When K-12 writes their budget and Career Tech writes their budget, usually December to February or so, and that's when they're making their teacher allocations, and that's a big bottleneck. And then we'll have a great legislative session and get investment. Well, by the time we can let schools know about that and they can apply for that, it's August and school has started. And we're in that scenario right now. Our Connect grant money that this legislature funded at $1 million for equipment to bring that workforce alignment, that is not going to be distributed to schools until this October, and the grant is open for 3 weeks when school starts. So it's timing, but it's an issue. I don't know how to necessarily solve that, but it's a timing issue. We need to find a way to either A, incorporate the teacher allocation components into some of this, or B, let schools know some kind of flexibility on local budgeting for schools on teacher allocations pending the approval or the granting of these type of dollars that could really get a program launched. That's a really big deal. I already discussed the materials budget with you. We believe in creating vertical communities and vertical alignment through high school to middle school to elementary. Too often, we looked at our career tech education space that existed only at the high school level in an elective format where a student has to choose to go in there. But if you did not have the step of where a student got to try something out to discover an interest, then they were just going to do what their friends' parents do or what their parents do, and it's an access issue. And so these programs that started in Roswell, Georgia, in an effort to reach students earlier, it's what I call a Bob Ross happy accident. We found that when we put a construction program at a middle school, 90% of students in that middle school took construction as a connections class, art, PE, music, construction. They tried it for 9 weeks. That's enough time for them to discover whether they like it and to keep going and to have something to really look forward to during their school day. Same thing happened at the elementary school. We have 600 students at Mountain Park Elementary taking construction every year. Their parents are thrilled what they're learning and what they're building. That feeds into Elkins Point Middle School with 360 students taking construction, and Crabapple Middle School with 360 students taking construction, into Roswell High School, which is absolutely dominating their peer competition in multiple competitions across the state and really producing. And so that's our model that is now spreading across the state. And we're, Forsyth's coming on strong, Savannah, Chatham, Columbus. It's happening. And so we're standing up these models across the state and showing people what it looks like. It's going well. Awareness, I won't read through all this, but we track awareness. We track the interactions between students and industry. We have programming that's plug and play that can go into the classroom before it gets to an actual program that would allow students to try something out for the very first time. And you can see we're at around 70,000. 20,000 students across the state built with Home Depot toolkits and made a toolbox for the very first time and drove their very first nail. That's been a fantastic program. We'll continue that. Here's how some of our programs are doing. The Cherokee County High School welding program won the state competition and just placed 4th nationally against all other states in welding. So congratulations to them. There's going to be a video here. I'm going to skip it. You can look at it later. But every year, we rally the whole state at the Georgia World Congress Center. Commissioner Dozier, I know you've participated in that. And we have around 10,000 people there, and it's the top skilled trade talent in the state in the K-12 and technical college space, and they are competing for a state championship. We also bring school counselors there to show them what it looks like, and we run professional development programming for that group as well to, again, build their industry networks and drive youth employment. Placement, you can see here, 1,600 plus placed this last school year out of these programs, and just outside of the programs, including some 20-day pre-apprenticeship training that our organization runs. You can see here, just for your information, kind of what that split is on how many are going to apprenticeship programs, technical college, direct to work, trade school, four-year college, et cetera. And so we have, for 4 years, we have a method of tracking this. And again, I think we need to make informed decisions with what the data is telling us. We have to stop what's called the lost decade. And that's the connection I mentioned coming out of K-12. K-12 is really good at getting you to graduation. Okay? It has very limited capacity to get you to beyond graduation. You're kind of on your own. That's that intermediary role, or some of us, organizations really need to braid together to bridge that gap out of K-12. I think it's outside organizations helping, and I also believe it's teachers, actually, who could use a little more money, and we have a program for this that could help bridge that gap. And CHAMP, as they say at UGA, it helps students finish the drill, finish it all the way, right? And so that's this concept. But right now in TCSG and other apprenticeship programs, 26 to 28 years old is the average age. We lost people for 10 years before they showed back up. In the construction industry, you can be a project superintendent in 10 years and have a 6-figure salary with an industry that's dying to teach you and welcomes you with open arms. So we would need to back up that connection point, make these connections in K-12. It goes down to work-based learning, just like you heard from Stuart. It goes down to internships and really taking students out of their bubble in K-12, get them into these industries to try it before they buy it, so to speak, and then they'll come back to school every day with a positive peer influence. And we're seeing that across the state. When a school does this with 1 student, the next year, 5 students. I've seen employers hire 10 to 12 students out of a single construction program because they started 2 years ago and had 1 success story. And we make a big deal out of that. The other is how we support CTAE at the K-12 level. There's a 70-30 split approximately, these are round numbers, between how we fund academics and 30% how we fund career and technical education overall. If you look at that K-12 outcomes on students earning 4-year bachelor degrees, 30% earn bachelor degrees in 5 to 6 years. And so it's an inverse relationship in how we fund it. If I say one thing today, it's clear youth employment barriers and double down on CTAE, reach an earlier grade level so students can know what their options really are and they can try these things out. We have a tool to help here. It's being piloted. Last year was a pilot year. We have 5,000 high school students that are in our trade programs that we support with profiles of what they're building, what they're making, and what they're interested in. We have employers now building profiles in there to browse those students and see who likes plumbing, who likes electrical, who likes masonry. Let's look at the quality of their work. And that employer can actually message the student through the teacher. Okay, that's important because we know FERPA and youth, we don't let an employer go directly to student, they message through a teacher. So we have a digital connection point where employers can find the trade program, find the needs of the trade program, and connect to their young talent. And Commissioner Dozier, this would be a welcome, we would welcome technical college, trade-related programs into this as well to do the same thing. This has been custom built for this workforce issue. I think it'll be applicable to other industries. Since I knew who we have here on the committee, and we're wrapping up, I wanted to take a little fun here. We've got some program successes that have Roswell High School versus Statesboro High School here. And these two have been slugging it out back to back, Senator Hickman and Albers here. So Statesboro High School wowed the state with the Teamworks win this past February or March at the Georgia World Congress Center, beat every single high school team in the state at the most premier construction competition there is. You guys are always in session during this time. I want to invite you down if you can sneak away on February 23rd this year. And you can see they won, a construction student won first in technical math. And so we really do both in these programs. You can see Roswell High School was right behind them. Teamworks champions the previous year. Blueprint reading, first place, and plumbing third. That plumber owns his own business. And we were out on a school holiday, and I was going to work at 7 a.m., and he passed me in his work truck on his day off of high school, and he was out pressure washing down the road. So just to end on a lighter note, but happy note, these are success stories from these programs. We won't read them, but it's always a teacher investing in the student, going the extra mile, and making a big difference. Here's a North Georgia Technical College student that came out of Rockmart High School that did a Skills USA competition in architectural drafting and drawing, and is now a truss designer at North Georgia Truss Company. And you'll see a lot of females here because these programs reach elementary and middle, they can reach every student in a school, and that's a key thing, that we reach every student in a school and give them an opportunity. So this is another student pursuing cabinet making at Columbus Technical College as well. So we love it. Save these dates if you want to see some competitions and actions. Our good friends at AGC Georgia host the regional competitions for Skills USA, and Construction Ready hosts the state competition, and we work on it all together, but we love it, and this is a very rewarding day to come see it on the front line. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Zach. Great presentation. Senator Hickman and I will have to probably get some resolutions put together to honor some young folks and teachers, which we'll gladly do. Very informative presentation, especially the work in the K through 12 education, which is something I think in my generation we did a whole lot more of, and we lost for that gap of maybe a couple of decades. And obviously you've got the right recipe, we just have to expand that. The one thing you mentioned about the timing for the budget and grant is something we should be able to solve. Okay. Perhaps we need to move those up to our amended budget, which will get out earlier. Yep. So I'm going to ask Haley here with our research team, who's putting together some of the information, and maybe we can work with some of our folks in our budget teams and our appropriations chairman to come up with some creative solutions to fix that. Are there any questions for Zach? Let's see, I've got Champ and then Ryan.
Okay, you mentioned something about a digital platform and how you keep them engaged. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yes, sir. We had a problem with, we just had too many ships passing each other in the night between all this talent in K-12 and the employer's capacity that has a workforce shortage. It's kind of like somebody needs to go to the doctor, but they're too sick to go to the doctor. That's a little bit what it was like, and we're trying to fix that in the sense of contractors seriously lack capacity to even help themselves in this scenario because of the backlog of what they had to build. And so we knew that technology, we have to leverage technology as one tool to help solve this problem. And so we knew that if industry could see what these students were actually doing, and these students could see what their opportunities were outside of their classroom bubble, that was a step in the right direction. It also solved a big data problem for us. We were manually hawking down data, 4 or 5 people on our team working on it all the time. It was taking away from us actually doing the work part, even though the data part was work, if you understand what I'm saying. So we decided that we would create the LinkedIn version for young people that are in CTAE programs. And we started with our own architecture and construction career cluster. And students now have an opportunity to upload pictures of what they're building, what they're making. It's like a portfolio of their work, and explore areas of interest and even indicate those areas of interest, and then automatically connect to employers that are in the geographic vicinity of them, proximity of them, and in the areas of their interest. And then we knew that teachers needed those connections points too. And so we developed custom from scratch a platform that does that. And we piloted last year. We piloted the student enrollment phase, and we have 5,000 plus students in our trade programs that are in there right now that we should look at sometime. And now we're piloting the employer enrollment part of that to make those connections. And so that's going to help with program support and students getting the job opportunities. We also have employers in there that are already cleared to hire at 16 and 17 years old, which is a very big deal, because it backs up the connection point where we can help students at their junior year instead of the tail end of their senior year, and those can be automated to help our work-based learning coordinators. We have, assets across the state and work-based learning coordinators at their schools. We have people, but those people still need tools and need help, and we have fronted the cost of this fully on our team to make this happen and come to a reality. And so we're excited about where it's going. And now we're working the employer side and continue to work the student side. This also automates our workforce data, so that's key as well. This gives us instant data on what connections are being made, because they get scheduled through the platform, what job offers are being made, even what wages students are earning. It's confidential, but we have that data so we can make informed decisions. And so we're very excited about it.
All right, and we got a question from Ryan. We'll have to do kind of a quick question and answer on this to stay on track.
Yep.
So my question to you would be that I think restaurants and construction share a lot of similarities in there. And we both have a huge labor shortage that is highly dependent, I think, sometimes on residents who are living in the state and, let's say, are seeking citizenship.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk to that workforce of yours that is looking for citizenship in Georgia, here to work, and how immigration plays a role in your hiring practice?
Sure, yeah. If you look on a construction site, you see a lot of individuals that would be seeking citizenship in our country. It's done different ways in the industry. Our industry as a whole position would be, if we can legally allow people to work that want to work, we want them to be able to work. And so, I know that there are some difficulties with the immigration workforce, but we would just prefer, I think I speak as an industry, that we would like to be able to tap that labor force, pay them fairly, bring it out from the shadows. That would be our ideal. But we run into barriers. A lot of times it's done through a broker that says everybody in their company is legal, and that's in the industry. And they're just passing the risk and the liability off to others is what it ends up playing out like. But we think that's definitely an opportunity for improvement in our state. Yeah.
All right, any final questions? Senator Beach?
Yes, sir.
That welding program is very successful in Cherokee. Thank you
Yes, sir.
for that.
Yes, sir.
My question to you is, I got two quick questions. One is, are we tracking these kids 3 years out to see if they're still in the industry and how they're doing? And then secondly, if there's a real success story, are they coming back to the high schools and giving testimonials saying, this is a great industry, I've got a great job, making a great living, and doing well?
Yes, sir. How we handled that manually, the 3-year, the retention, longitudinal tracking. So that was a condition of our grant with Bernie Marcus, that we establish a longitudinal tracking system. And so this platform is that. It does track students beyond graduation. They flip over to a professional profile and become public and active at that point. Before manually, we would do it with following up with the employer individually and say, hey, does this person still work there? And we got our early data like that, but now this platform is meant to solve that problem on that data. And then you'd ask the success stories of people coming out of programs and coming back. Yes, absolutely. Best practice across the board is a young graduate, young professional comes out of a K-12 program. We have a student from Anning Johnson that got hired out of Cross Keys High School, and he went through their carpentry apprenticeship program. He's now coming back into the classroom, and he's the best recruiter, and he's saying, hey, listen, I was like you, here I am, I'm young, I make money. Evan McGee at Holder Construction, one of the best ambassadors, he's an assistant superintendent right now, so that's a great recipe. What we really need him to do, though, in addition to that, is come back and teach. We have the same teacher shortage as we do a workforce shortage out there in the industry, and so we're kind of looking at how do we make that happen.
Thanks, Zach. Okay, one final question, Senator Estevez.
Thanks, very quickly. I know you're working with CTA programs. How have y'all worked to embed yourselves in some of these academies that school districts have across the state where the entire high school population is able to come to these centralized locations and work?
Yes, we work with many career academies and vocational, type school, centralized schools in that regard. We help them set those up, set up the lab. We will work them on the curriculum and implementing the program and training the instructor. And then we're generally on the advisory boards supporting the program, and we're in the program speaking to students. So we do that universally, whether the setting is a high school, traditional high school, or a centralized career academy model. Very active, very involved in those, and have seen great success.
Thank you very much, Zach. We appreciate your time, and we got some late arriving presentations, yours and being one of those, so we'll make sure that the committee members get a digital copy of that as well. Thank you. Okay, next up, Shane with Carroll Daniel Construction. Come on down. Look forward to hearing from you, a kind of timely back-to-back with all things construction, which is obviously integral not just to that industry, but how they support all of the other industries here in our great state.
Good morning. Thank you, Senator Albers, for having me and your committee for having me up to speak. Just like Zach mentioned, construction we know is facing a shortage, right? It's across the board. And so we had an idea back in 2019 to combat our shortage of superintendents. And so what we did was we created an apprenticeship program through Lanier Technical College. We partnered with them, and we created an apprenticeship program to basically create this pipeline to mold and form superintendents for the construction industry. That was our biggest concern at the moment. And so with that program has been highly successful. We're in our 4th cohort. It is beginning to catch ground, be replicated across the state. But with that came a couple of roadblocks that we ran into. And they're good problems to have, right? So the first one that I want to talk to you about today is we had a couple of success stories with our students who they completed the program, they get an associate's degree in construction management technology, and then they come to me and they say, hey, Shane, I think I want more. I want a 4-year degree. I want to get a construction management degree from Kennesaw State or Georgia Southern. And so I sit down and I talk to them and I say, okay, well, let's see what we can do, right? I want you to be the most successful person you can be. And so we sit down only to realize that the 2 years and the 60 credit hours this student received now equates to 15 transferable hours. So they go from being a potential junior transfer into a 4-year university to a freshman, just finished up their first semester. So that 4-year construction management degree now became a 6-year degree. And I think that right there was one of the heartaches for me, is to tell that 18, 19-year-old student, it's going to take you, 4 more years. This is the best I can do, right? So I think that was one of our roadblocks we hit, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about how I think we can resolve that. The next roadblock we ran into was the success of this program as it replicates across the state, we're having issues replicating the same program we had at Lanier Tech to other technical colleges. And I'll give you an example. We have a certain curriculum at Lanier Tech, and Oconee Fall Line Technical College reached out and said, hey, we want to replicate your program. We want to work with a construction company down here, and we want to do that. I remind you that Oconee Fall Line and Lanier Tech are 200 miles apart almost. But there was hesitancy from Lanier Technical College to give their program and their curriculum to Oconee Fall Line. I have said on committees, advisory committees for different technical colleges, and we do SWOT analysis, and each time a threat gets brought up, it is, we're afraid that other technical colleges are going to take our students. How can a technical college sit back and be afraid that another technical college is going to take a potential student and be successful closer to where they live? So that was my second roadblock. And so now, as I sat and I did a little bit more research, I realized that this problem is not just construction, right? The ability to transfer credit hours, the ability to have a replicated curriculum across the state in your technical college, it also applies to nursing, it applies to early childhood education. It's not just construction, right? So I think today I'm here more from a industry workforce development saying that all of these workforce needs, all of these career opportunities that are struggling to find individuals to work for them, we've got to find a better way to help bridge that gap from the technical college to the university system of Georgia so that we do not limit the success of our students. For those that want to go above and beyond and go for everything that they can get, right? And so today I propose that we do a couple things. I think that I personally would like to see a curriculum that can easily transfer to a four-year university. And I'm not asking that every credit hour that a person takes at a technical college transfer, but more than 15 hours out of 60. 1/4 is all that will transfer. Maybe it's a half, maybe it's 3/4, I get it, right? There are certain courses that need to be taught by high-level professionals in that. But a course like Introduction to Construction Safety, you go to any job site in the state of Georgia, OSHA is being taught by industry professionals. It's not being taught by those with master's degrees and PhDs. So what's good for the industry should be good enough for our technical colleges and our university systems as well. And then the second part is I also would like to see a construction management technology curriculum that is university across the state or universal across the state. It can be the same 60 hours of credit, and I can say, hey, our program is rocking in Gainesville, Georgia, right? We've got 20 kids that have went through, 5 of them are already assistant superintendents. They're running $10 million, $20 million, $30 million jobs. Let's bring that to your local technical college as well. And once again, it's not just about the construction industry. I think we need to look at it as a whole for these high-need career areas, whether it's nursing, education, construction, whatever. I think it's something across the board. Thank you.
Shane, that was very powerful. You bring up some excellent points. One of the things we discussed in some prior meetings is we celebrate when someone gets accepted to, a major college, university. We do not celebrate when they're going to one of Commissioner Dozier's technical colleges nearly the same. Now, I know some schools are obviously making a lot better effort, but we should be having celebrations as big, if not bigger, for folks. But I do think that maybe we can work, and Commissioner, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, to connect those dots, because we do want to give people the unlimited upside potential. And I will just add to that, I have always had a concern that we have been teaching the 2 years of prerequisite college classes the same way for 100 years. And if someone's going into a certain industry, they don't need to learn Shakespeare. They do not. And I think it's a real chance for us to spring forward and evolve that area. And I think you're touching on some important issues. So let me turn it over to Commissioner Dozier to talk more about our technical college system.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I do appreciate your presentation. One I have talked to Brian about, which was the articulation issue that you mentioned. The second we have not talked about, so I'm a little disappointed to just hear about that today. But I can assure you we have programs that cross all 22 technical colleges, and that's very doable. And now that I'm aware that we may have an issue with a program being replicated, we can fix that very quickly. The articulation agreement, I just want to speak a little bit about that. That's something that we do have a lot of work left to do on. We're very proud that from a state level, our university system and our technical college system have 28 courses that articulate, meaning if you take that course with us, it articulates into the university system. Those will typically those core classes like English 1101, Math 1101, and many others. Beyond that state articulation agreement, we have local articulation agreements. So depending on which technical college you're in and which colleges are around that, we have a series of articulation that may be specific courses all the way to what is being presented today is a true 2+2, meaning you do your 2-year degree in the technical college and you pick up where you left off and finish your 4-year degree with those final 2 years. I have been in discussions with the chancellor, hoping that we can do some true statewide 2+2s across the system. There are certain university system colleges, such as Kennesaw, that have a true 2+2 across the system in certain engineering areas, and those are very doable. And so we have, I don't want the transfer that you mentioned, and we'll look into it, the 15 transferable hours. I've got to look and see if that's uniform across the system with this program, or if that's just unique to the colleges in your area. But there's obvious work that we can do in that area because we have all the above, from a true 2+2, what's being asked, to the 26 articulated classes statewide. So I'm very open to true 2+2s from a state level, and thank you for that push, and Brian's been very helpful on that.
Absolutely.
And definitely I can help you and help us, because we should be able to have true statewide solutions, and we do have some of those. Civil engineering, one of the things that came to us through Russell was a 2-year civil engineering pathway, and he'd like to see commonality of those programs across the state, and we now have that. We are working on a program right now that's connected to the electrification that's going to be a true statewide solution across TCSG. And so this is an option we can help you with, and I look forward to it. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions for Shane? Seeing none, thank you. Excellent testimony today. Okay, next up with the Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce. Tim, would you come on to the podium here, or to the table?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Tim Carroll. I am Senior Director for Talent Development in the Public Policy Department at the Metro Atlanta Chamber. Thank you, Chairman Albers, and members of the committee, for allowing me to present here today. What I'm bringing for you today, and you have copies coming in front of you, is our 2023 Talent Supply Report. This is the third in a series of talent reports that we have done since 2017. So I also want to preface this by saying the report that's coming down to you, it's on the end of your table there. The report that's coming down your way is an advanced copy. This does not technically go out publicly until September 20th, so you are the first public group to get your eyes on this report. So thank you for allowing this opportunity. We set out on this journey for talent to look at the degrees and certifications being supplied across our state, matching those degrees and certifications to demand on the job side. And we do that primarily through job postings that are publicly available. We do some discussion around employment and unemployment, and then some skills that are required for those jobs as well. Through this analysis of data, we identify where we have some over/under supply, and then what are some recommendations for how we could correct some of that over/under through some tried and proven methods. We also want to be able to track our progress. So as we try things in industry, as you all try different policy recommendations, we want to see what's working and then highlight those things that are working. And there's some examples of that included in the report as well. And then lastly, this is just to inform the work that we are doing here at the Chamber. So this would be primarily through the interactions that we do directly with our companies in talent acquisition and HR. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on data. You have the full report in front of you, but I do want to talk briefly about how the data in the ideal cycle would be used. That we have this data that is collected, that is presented to employers, that it informs how we train, that it then feeds back into our education and training systems, that then increases or corrects any gaps in supply or oversupply, and then the job market responds to that talent need. So that is the ideal. I'm going to touch briefly on the types of information in the report. I'm not going to read through these slides. We talk about migration, about how we are doing as a metro area and MSA areas compared to our peer states and peer metros. We look at job postings by industry and how those are increasing since the previous or the initial report. We look at the supply of different degrees and certifications of all levels, not just 2- and 4-year, but including high school diploma and for certification level, and then how that matches up. And so we look at job postings for those and then how much supply we have on that side. We also dive pretty deep into the skills requested in those job postings. I want to put an asterisk on this, and this is mentioned in the report, but this is a changing landscape on the employer side, where, say, 20 years ago, you would probably have a skill list in a job posting. It looks very similar to what is in the presentation. These are more general terms like communications and multitasking and computer skills or leadership. What you're seeing now more is that companies are moving to actual tasks that are required that include a skill, not necessarily the generic skill. So rather than saying something like communications, it would be the ability to schedule meetings for multiple people, online and in person, or whatever that specific task is. That is the direction that job descriptions are going. I say that because what we've heard repeatedly for some of our education partners is that they want more details on the types of skills and qualifications that are needed in their degree and certification program. So industry is attempting to respond to that as well, so it improves the overall system. I want to spend a minute, though, on what we found in the data, because I think this is really going to the heart of why I'm here today. Number one, I want to say Georgia has gotten really good at what we do. Number one state to do business years in a row, and we're very successful at economic development, example of where we're sitting today. With that comes some big responsibilities, though. It is on the talent side that we have a lot of jobs to fill. So while we have increased the number of degrees and certifications and people that we are graduating from these programs, we also have a much larger increase in the jobs that are demanding those. So it's just to say bravo for good work, but with it comes big challenges. The second, and this speaks more to what was mentioned by some of the speakers earlier, is that early work experience of any kind is more critical today than it was 5 years ago. This goes directly to frontline or customer service facing roles primarily. So if you are in a customer interaction where you're having to interact with customers, not just sales, but anyone who's a frontline worker, you could also think EMS or anyone who is dealing one-on-one with people. What we've seen with those job postings since 2017 is that the increase requiring prior work experience for what most would consider an entry-level role has increased significantly. And what that tells us is that there is a lot of churn in those industries. You have a lot of turnover that is probably a little higher than what it was in 2017, and as a result, employers tend to ask for prior work experience to guarantee that that person will stay in that role longer than what they're experiencing. So I say that, that is one example. The second one would be on those highly certified or highly skilled positions where you might have the opportunity, you would think, coming right out of college with a degree. I'll pick on an example such as data analyst or data science, and going right into a role is very difficult to break that door in unless you have some type of prior work experience. It can be as minor as a short-term internship, or it can be as long as a longer apprenticeship program or any type of prior work experience. It does not even necessarily have to be in the industry in which they are applying. It is the idea that someone has committed a portion of their time to a work experience. But that is absolutely an increasing factor for our entry-level work. Number three, and this goes back to informing how we as employers inform this data, right? It's one thing to look at numbers, it's another to actually interpret what these numbers mean. And when I say there are numbers beyond the data that we see, we have a group at the Metro Atlanta Chamber that we assemble on a regular basis that are several dozen HR and talent acquisition heads of our companies. And one of the insights that we had when we were showing them some of this preliminary data, and I'm going to pick again on data analysts, this also happened when we were looking at construction numbers, is we were posting a specific job number up there that we pulled from a state database to say, this is the number of open jobs for data analysts. The people who sat in that room, which at the time was about 20 companies, said, collectively in this room, we're hiring more than that total. So something is off. And what we figured out is that the data sets that we pull across a number of different sources are only showing the actual posting. So it's one job posting. But for some of our companies, that posting is evergreen, which means it sits out there, but it actually represents 100 positions or 10 positions, or depending on the industry, that one job posting is a placeholder for more than one position. So what we have realized is that a lot of the planning that takes place, not just from a state level, but from an employer level and how we do economic development, isn't necessarily the true number. So what we'd expect to see is the next iteration of this report is going to have a much different look and feel because it's going to be informed more directly by industry and by businesses who are contributing real-time data and what their actual job openings are. It does have some implications on state policy. If you think about the planning units that happen across economic development, education, of all levels that rely on those job posting numbers to indicate budgets, to indicate forecasting, we're seeing that there's a little bit of a disconnect there that we're hoping we can correct with the next iteration. And then the last, number 4, I know is not new to this committee, but that is that we've got to get better at developing our own talent. We are not the only state that's having this particular issue. There are dozens of states that are in the same exact spot. We are all competing for talent. We still have to keep up our import game. You know, Georgia is really good at importing talent globally and nationally, but we've got to do better at accessing where talent sits in our backyard. Many of you on this committee had a hand in helping with things like our Second Chances legislation. You heard earlier about some of the unique populations in Georgia that are an untapped labor market. It is important that we dive deep on some of those populations. The last one I'll say is that companies, and you heard this a little bit from Stuart too, about how companies are responding internally and connecting internal pathways and education and really thinking about not just a single job for the rest of your life, but sometimes it's a pathway that that individual could follow. And for some individuals, that can start very early, before they finish high school. And for others, it might happen mid-career. But the idea being that employers have a responsibility, just like the state does, to make sure that any pathway, whether it's through an education partner or whether it's internal to a company, has an outcome that's profitable for everyone. So I say that in full candor. How we use this data, one is we try to do smarter partnerships. We focus on where the critical jobs are in our companies and then connecting those with education partners that help fill that. We also use this data to project, like how we need to establish partnerships. Is it at which level? How do we determine those pathways inside of a company? Many of you on this committee had a hand in removing or reviewing the state requirement for a four-year college degree. Our companies are doing the same thing. You see job postings where a number of hard degrees have been eliminated. And then the last is just being strategic about how we invest and how we partner. And you've heard some of that today. I won't go back in to reiterate that. September 20th, this report goes live, and it will be at talentsupply.report.com and on the MAC website. I mentioned our Talent Collab, which is our collection of HR folks. We are happy to talk through recommendations at any time. And then I'll give you an advance warning that in Q4, we have a student interest and aptitude report, which will also be the third in the series of reports that we'll do that will come out. It talks about K-12 student interest and aptitude. And I'm happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Tim, for that great presentation as well as for the report. Everyone has a copy here. We've got a question from Senator Estevez first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple quick questions. One related to point 4 in developing our own talent. Are we tracking how many people, the migration trends of people being trained, going to college here, getting a degree, and then leaving Georgia, and how that stacks up against those coming in? And then the second question is related to the early work experience and the change that we've seen in recent times with young people with the gig economy and jumping around very quickly, and how we're adapting as a workforce and adapting to that trend.
Yeah, there's been a lot of interesting moves around the gig economy idea, this idea that you have more contract work, sometimes remote. In fact, if you look at a lot of the job postings that are here in Georgia, they aren't always for companies or positions that are even based here. And that's true in other states as well. So I think that trend is here to stay. It may decrease in some industries and may increase in others, but I think that idea that skills and talent are invested in the person, not the place that the person is calling home, should be a reality for a lot of industries. I will say, though, I do want to put a check by this, that is not the norm across every industry. There are certain subsets of industry, whether that's things like call centers or whatever you may call it, like there are subsets of companies that will work for. For the majority of companies and the majority of their positions, that is not the case. So I just want to put that disclaimer out there. On the out migration, this has been a challenge. We looked at a lot of data sets when we were putting this report together, and it was really difficult to find a number that was not only consistent but reliable, and that, in other words, it can be backed up by more than one source. But we weren't really comfortable putting that particular information in here. For instance, like you could see some where you would have graduates of programs, and then they're trying to track where that student is going to, but that requires the coordination of a lot of labor departments to put that together. And it's also not necessarily looking at other factors that influence that person's move. For instance, where did they come from? Where were they born? Where do they have a family connection? Which is usually the number one reason why a person will move across the state line for a job. Anyway, use that as one example for why that data can get a little smushy. So we just weren't comfortable putting it in this particular report with certainty.
All right, Senator Hickman, quick question.
Yeah, Tim, just a question and an observation. First, the question is, I have in the world that I'm in, I'm an accountant. In the world I'm in, communication is a big issue, and I'm not talking about telecommunication. I'm talking about having a verbal conversation. Has anybody done any studies about cell phones in schools and how that takes away not only the concentration of the kids in the classroom, but also their communication abilities? And the second thing, an observation from our families, Joy and I decided about a month ago that if we're going to take our family out to dinner or lunch, there'll be if we're going to pay for it, there's going to be no cell phone usage at the table. And I tell you, it is unbelievable, people, how much more conversation our family has now and how much more we know about each other by not being on cell phones. But if you would answer my first question.
Yes, sir. And I personally feel you on the cell phone. I have seen it implemented in certain districts and certain schools where it is a hard lockdown. I'll say, for example, in some employers, you will even see cubby holes outside where you enter the workplace where your cell phone goes in before you go in. That is a unique case, though. The reality is that the age that we live in, the ability for an employer to instantly communicate with an employee is pretty vital. You think of everything from inclement weather to a sickness to childcare problems to a need to come in 10 minutes earlier than what was originally scheduled or 10 minutes later. That ability to instantly communicate is a requirement not just on the individual side, but on the employer side. So it can, I say that because there's probably not an absolute answer to what you're asking. I think for some employers, they've got to adapt and they've got to come up with a solution that works for their workplace. And the same thing with the school. If it works for the school environment to say no cell phones in the classroom, then that's what should work best for the school. But it would be impossible to dictate that across every business, at least from our standpoint.
I know in our area, one of the private schools, Pinewood Christian Academy, is implemented that all the cell phones must be given to the homeroom teacher when they come in the mornings, and then a homeroom teacher in turn gives them back in the afternoon when they leave.
Yes, sir. I've seen that as employers as well. Interesting.
All right, just to stay on track, we're going to cap the time. Tim, thank you, and if you have any further questions, I know you'll be here after the meeting as well. Appreciate you bringing that up, Senator Hickman. I think that is an important part. What we've heard as a consistent theme in these meetings is the lack of soft skills, especially for our younger generation right now. That wasn't necessarily an issue a generation before them, and certainly these have a lot to do with that. However, it comes back to parents too, and I know one of the recommendations we always like to make is we have to educate kids more. But sometimes I think we have to educate parents to do their job as well. Some of the things probably our parents taught us of looking someone in the eye and shaking with them their hand with a firm handshake and having an adult conversation with people and getting to work on time and doing your job and communicating. And I think in today's society, as we've become overly technology dependent, we've lost some of that. And it's an art I think we need to find again. As we've gone through this committee, we've been talking a lot about what is needed in the private marketplace. What do businesses need? However, what we can't ignore is a key component, which is the government that provides jobs, but also helps to do the work to lay the foundation for those jobs in the private marketplace. So I'm thrilled today that we're going to bring in representatives from both the state, the city, and county governments to give us an update on what they have been doing for workforce and where they see this going and some recommendations for us. And what we're going to do is we're going to have each one of these groups come up. We're going to hold questions to the very end, and I'll just ask all of you to be on the ready for any final questions as a group so we can stay on time. So we're going to begin with the Georgia Department of Administrative Services. So Al, if you want to come over to the microphone, we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Al Howell. I'm the Deputy Commissioner with the Human Resource Administration with the Georgia Department of Administrative Services. And kind of in a couple of words, who HRA is that we provide, I say we're the enterprise HR leader with the state, and we provide assistance to the other agencies in terms of recruitment, talent management, compensation, areas of HR. We provide them tools and resources. That's who we're all about. And I just want to thank Senator Albers and also the Senate Study Committee for inviting us to be here today. And what I'd like to do today is just talk about a couple of things. First of all, I'd like to share with you some metrics and demographic metrics and some other metrics about our workforce. Then talk about some of the challenges that we face with our state workforce. And then wrap up with sharing with you some insights from a retention study that we completed this year with the help of Deloitte Consulting. And I believe this information taken together will give you a better understanding of the needs and problems, but also the opportunities regarding our state workforce. So that's the agenda for this morning. So we'll start looking at, first of all, the state of Georgia workforce, give you a little bit of information about the composition of our workforce, and look at it from a generational standpoint. And the slide on the left shows our current composition by generation. And we're like a lot of industries today. We have 5 different generations that are working together at the same time, which is historic and unique, and it presents different challenges for employers. But basically, 42% of our workforce is made up of either millennials, those born between 1981 and 1997, or Gen Z, which are individuals that were born after 1998. So about 50% of our workforce is either millennials or Gen Z. And that's also reflected in the hiring. As you look at the chart to the right, that indicates our hiring, and this is as of FY23. The data I'm sharing with you is as of April of this year. And so 65% of our hires are either millennials or Gen Z. And some other information about our workforce is that we currently have around 69,898 employees. 66% of our workforce is female, and the median age is 46.6 years old, and then the median salary is $46,427. So that's just some demographics about our workforce. Also, to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we face, but maybe back up a little bit about our workforce. Since we do have a high population of millennials and Gen Zs, it's very important in terms of development. One issue we find is that, and I've heard people talk about it this morning, is accelerating development in terms of getting our Gen Zs and also our millennials ready to step up, because we do have a lot of baby boomers that are leaving. So in terms of getting them prepared and ready for leadership or for other positions, accelerating their development. How can we do that? Accelerate quicker. But the next slide, I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the issues that we face as a state employer. And the first issue is that separations have exceeded hires for the last 5 fiscal years. You see on the chart on the left shows for all state agencies. The chart on the right is for executive branch agencies only. And you can see beginning in FY18 through FY22, we've had more separations than hires. We have like a hole in the bucket, where we have people we're hiring people, but then people are leaving at a greater rate. So we never can really get up to the level of established budgeted positions. So that what that means, that leaves a lot of employees that are here, they have to do extra work. They're constantly having to fill in because we can't get up to that. We can't plug that hole. Fortunately, you'll notice in April of FY23, the trend is starting to reverse. Matter of fact, you'll notice the last chart, the graphs there for FY23, we're seeing where hiring is starting to exceed separation. So that's a good sign. And we believe that is partly due to the COLAs, the 2% and the 5% COLA that was appropriated by the General Assembly and by Governor Kemp has had an impact, because we trend this data, and then you see when the COLAs took effect, we start seeing numbers going up. So that's a good sign to see. Another challenge that we have is high consistent turnover. And again, the story is kind of the same here with turnover, is that for the last 5 fiscal years, beginning in FY 2016, we've had consistent high turnover. And beginning with FY18 through FY22, our turnover rate has been over 20%. Matter of fact, the highest year was FY22, where it was 25.3%. That's a lot of turnover. And you'll notice again, too, that we're starting to see that trend come down a little bit. We're projecting that for FY23, we may be slightly below 20% or right at it. But that has been one of our problems, is high consistent turnover, which creates, I've heard someone use the word churn. And that's what's creating for us, is that we have this churn where we have this constant turnover. And so it's definitely hard to, in terms of filling positions and keeping people in those positions. And to take another look at this, this shows separations by generation. And the separations is starting to trend lower by generations. But if you'll notice the blue line, that is Gen Z. And their turnover rate was as high as 76% at the end of FY21. Now that has gone down to 30.3% we're projecting for FY23, but that's still high. And then for millennials, they were at 28.3, they're down to 16.6%. But those two generations, they have the highest turnover rate, and I'm talking about voluntary turnover rate, than any other generation that we hire. We're not keeping the next generation. And that's very, very important, but we want to remain relevant as an employer. You have to be able to keep the younger generation. You got to capture their imagination. Now, one thing about millennials and Gen Z is that they are interested in career exploration. They like to try out different things. They also like to grow and develop. So some of this could be natural, in terms of not being able to keep the younger generation. But I believe we have something great to offer them, and that is mission and purpose. A lot of the things at the state that we do has a lot of its purpose, and we help others, and that really resonates, with Gen Zs and with millennials. But here again, that's just another look at turnover. You'll notice for the other generations, the trend is starting to go down, so that is good. But I'd also like to share with you some information from a retention study that we did just recently. We did this in conjunction with Deloitte Consulting. This was done during March through June of this year. And what we wanted to be able to find out is, what motivates people to stay with the state and what would motivate them to leave the state. We wanted to also have some strategies or some recommendations about how can we attract people to the state, how can we engage them, and then also how can we develop them. So that was the whole purpose of the retention study. And what I wanted to show you on this chart here, first of all, we did, part of the study was an engagement survey that was administered to all state employees. We had over 12,000 employees respond, 12,433 employees responded. That's about a 25% response rate. And they represented 62 agencies. And so we felt like we had a good response rate. And in terms of the chart you see here, part of the survey, there were 42 statements that employees had to respond to in these seven different categories, dealing with the state of Georgia organizational culture, agency organizational culture, job satisfaction, relationship with management, development and support, leadership and management, and team dynamics. So over those categories, there were 42 statements where employees had to respond either I agree, strongly agree, I'm neutral, I disagree, I strongly disagree. What's encouraging with this is that the overall strong, either agree or strongly agree, was 77% for those in aggregate of these seven categories. But I'm not going to go through all the data, but I want to point out a couple of interesting data facts from this that I think is relevant to what we're talking about today in terms of attracting talent. First of all, 88% of the employees that responded to the survey, they either agreed or strongly agreed that they believe in their agency's mission. That's tremendous. 88% said, hey, I believe in my agency's mission and what they do. 83% either agreed or strongly agreed that they enjoy working with the state, which I think that's positive. 85% either agreed or strongly agreed that they felt like their work was meaningful and it added value to others. It's things we can capitalize on in terms of trying to attract talent and keep talent. The area of development and support was the area that we rated the lowest. As you see from the chart, the overall rate, strongly agree rate was only 62% for development and support. And to kind of pick something from those responses, only 59% of employees either agreed or strongly agreed that the state provides training and development opportunities that are relevant to my role. So this is an area that we need to maybe look at and how can we improve that. Development is the ultimate perk. And that is something that, especially with the younger generation, they're very interested in. But development and support maybe is an area that we may need to focus on in terms of attraction and retention. And another part of the engagement survey, we wanted to find out what's your intentions to stay. We couldn't ask employees, hey, are you planning on leaving? But we just were asking questions in terms of what's your intentions for staying with the state. And encouraging enough, 63% of the respondents said that their intentions is to stay either 6 years or more with the state, where 26% said, hey, I intend to stay another 1 to 5 years with the state. So that was positive. But I wanted to draw your attention to the bottom of the slide, To me, this is the meat of the retention survey or the retention study. This shows the 5 top reasons for attrition, for retention, and for reemployment. And what I mean by reemployment is it's someone who's left state government and then they came back. And what made them come back? And you'll see the top 5 reasons for each one of those 3 categories. Drivers of attrition. What would drive someone to leave or motivate them to leave? Compensation was number 1. And then limited career opportunities, lack of work-life balance, negative work environment, and then lack of location flexibility. Now, this is coming directly from employees. They're telling us this is what would make me want to leave the state of Georgia. And then also in terms of retention, work-life balance, leveraging skills and interests and benefits. And then for reemployment, those 3 top reasons are mirrored also. Again, work-life balance, leveraging skills, and then benefits. We also had focus groups that were done. There were over about 1,500 employees that said that they would participate. Deloitte talked with 81. You see what the drivers of retention for them, based upon the focus groups, was strong connection to mission, remote work opportunities, and then retirement and benefits were very important. And these are some things that we are doing at HRA to try to address the issue of recruitment and retention. One big activity we're doing is that we're currently working with Senate Bill 3, where we are looking at job requirements for jobs in terms of college degrees, and should some of our job descriptions be more experience-based instead of educational-based. And so we're currently in that process. We've created a new unit within HRA that's focusing on recruitment and retention. We've done a retention study, and also we just completed what we call the Workforce Strategies Initiative, where we work with the state agencies to try to develop career pipelines for entry-level positions. So those are just some of the things that we're working on within HRA.
Thank you, Al. That's a great presentation. We're going to let you step away, and we're going to have Noah and Brian come up with GMA. Thank you for the call out for Senate Bill 3. That was another initiative from our Lieutenant Governor that I carried through the Senate, and it was passed and signed into law by Governor Brian Kemp to look at all of our state jobs to make sure we're matching up the right education and experience requirements so we can make sure we always have the best and brightest on staff. We'll turn it over to the Georgia Municipal Association. Gentlemen.
Thank you, and good morning, Chairman Albers and members of the committee. My name is Noah Rainitz, and I'm a member of the Governmental Relations team for the Georgia Municipal Association. Chairman, I'd like to thank you for inviting us here today to speak a little bit about municipal workforce development, and I have Brian here to speak about some of the challenges we've identified within that space, as well as some of the solutions going forward. So, Brian.
Great, thank you. Again, thank you, Noah. I'm Brian Wallace. I'm the Director of Strategic Initiatives at the Georgia Municipal Association, so thank you for this opportunity today. I'll be first introducing GMA and Georgia City Solutions to the folks that don't know who they are. The Georgia Municipal Association represents all of Georgia's 537 cities. Its mission is to anticipate and influence the forces shaping Georgia's cities and to provide leadership, tools, and services that assist cities in becoming more innovative, effective, and responsive. GMA's board is comprised of city officials from across the state. Georgia City Solutions is a 501c3 nonprofit established by GMA in 2018. It operates with a separate board of directors, including 3 city officials, the GMA CEO and executive director, along with individuals from the private and nonprofit sectors. It is dedicated to helping cities address various issues, one of which is municipal workforce development. So recognizing the limitations of time, I'll delve directly into the issue at hand. Georgia cities are facing a familiar yet daunting predicament, finding and retaining a skilled workforce. Factors like private sector competition, imminent retirements, and evolving job expectation from potential employees requires city officials to rethink the recruitment and retention strategies. Regarding the upcoming wave of retirements in Georgia's municipal workforce, around 25% of the approximately 40,000 city employees in Georgia will become eligible for retirement by 2029. That is a substantial figure. For retirements alone, Georgia cities will need to identify 10,000 replacements to fill essential positions in public safety, utilities, public works, recreation, planning, community development, and management. And the ongoing population decline in rural Georgia County adds complexity to this challenge for cities in those areas. What cities want and need mirror those of any employer. They want competent, engaged, responsible employees that care about the quality of their work and the communities they serve. So GMA has been actively addressing the municipal workforce challenge over the last 6 to 7 years. We've established an advisory council of city officials focused on this issue. We've developed a job recruitment campaign and resources to help cities. We've added workforce-related courses to the GMA training program. We have held workforce sessions at the association's annual convention and other meetings, and have offered webinars and provided information on the GMA website. We've also launched the Jobs with Purpose initiative with Georgia City Solutions. This initiative stemmed from a statewide municipal workforce needs assessment by GCS and the Carl Vinson Institute of Government in 2021. The needs assessment found that 85% of cities face challenges attracting applicants, with smaller cities having a bit easier time with that. Police, utility, and sanitation roles were especially tough to fill. 35% of surveyed cities predicted a skills gap in the next 2 years, so this was done in 2021, so they were looking ahead 2 years, with 14% already experiencing a skills gap at the time of the survey. City employees averaged 45 years of age, slightly above the national average of almost 43 years of age, again back in 2021. 45% of the cities had an average age of between 40 and 50 years of age, and a few had an average of 60 years of age and older. Now, those are primarily pretty small cities with just a few employees. Larger cities at 83% and medium-sized cities at 67% found it challenging to retain employees, while this was less pronounced in smaller cities at 39%. A quarter of the cities felt that pay was the least competitive benefit they offered, and nearly half of surveyed cities lacked a workforce plan, with only 5% having a formal, centralized workforce plan in place. Based on this data, GMA compiled a strategy and playbook listing actionable strategies for cities, GMA, and GCS to address challenges in recruitment, retention, pay and benefits, and planning and partnerships. One of the recommendations for GMA and GCS was to offer grants to cities for consulting and other supportive services in order to help them, the cities, address their workforce development needs. This is what I'll briefly touch on now. Through funding provided by GCS, we're helping cities proactively address their workforce needs through planning and strategy implementation. Our pilot cities were Brunswick and Douglas. The work in these 2 cities was partially funded by a grant GCS received from the Volcker Alliance, which is a nationwide group that is interested in this public service. GCS has secured additional funding that has enabled it to expand this work to 6 more cities: Griffin, Thomasville, Cordele, Adel, Morrow, and Rockmart. The work in each city is being done in 2 phases. The first phase involves assisting the city in conducting a municipal workforce needs assessment, where they look at their current staffing levels, review retention and turnover data, as well as current job openings, review the age of employees to understand how many are close to retirement and in which departments, discuss what's working well in the city in regard to workforce development, as well as what the city's challenges are, and also to determine what the city should be working on going forward. From that, we help them come up with a strategy and actionable items to address their self-identified needs. In the second phase, the cities receive assistance in formulating a job recruitment strategy. The city will be provided a toolkit with city-specific visuals and targeted messaging focused on addressing the city's top recruiting challenges. Through our engagement, a city benefits from 1, conducting a comprehensive workforce needs assessment to identify gaps and concerns, 2, crafting actionable strategies to address its workforce needs based on the needs assessment, and 3, developing a recruitment strategy using GMA's Starts With Me job recruitment campaign and resources. While the work of this committee primarily concerns the private sector, as the chairman alluded to earlier, there is a need with the public sector. It's worth acknowledging that a thriving private job market directly affects cities, counties, and our friends in the school systems. As populations grow and the job landscape changes, local governments require qualified talent to provide essential services. Georgia's local governments support businesses and require a skilled, capable workforce. Just as private enterprises do, cities need employees who are proficient and committed to their roles. City jobs, integral to their communities, offer meaningful employment that contributes value to both the individual in the job and to the community at large. As your committee continues its efforts exploring opportunities within the technical college system to train future city employees is prudent. Some technical colleges already collaborate with cities on specific programs, and we're very thankful and grateful for that. And this strong collaborative partnership could be expanded to meet long-term municipal employment needs. So I think it's worthy of further discussion. Additionally, supporting cities in creating their own workforce needs assessment would yield positive outcomes. These assessments are crucial, yet the nature of cities' operations and limited resources often pose challenges to initiating them. It's important to recognize, and I know this group does, that addressing the state's workforce development challenges isn't a linear path. It's interwoven with economic and community development, housing, education, and quality of life challenges and opportunities. This intricate landscape affects workforce development from multiple directions and angles. This complexity is why GCS also concentrates on literacy, exemplified by the Mayor's Reading Club program launched in August of 2022. This initiative enhances children's literacy skills and early reading achievements through the encouragement, leadership, and support of mayors and cities. In support of this effort, GCS commissioned a series of children's books to teach young readers about cities. The first book, Georgia Caroline Visits City Hall, introduces readers to city services and operations. The second book, Georgia Caroline Visits Our Hometown Heroes, highlights the important role of local police and fire departments. 3 more books are in the works. These efforts aim to enhance our youngest residents' understanding of the role of cities, the different jobs found in cities, and how cities and the people in city jobs contribute to the success of Georgia. It is truly a long-term game. City jobs are essential, impactful, and meaningful. Our efforts are focused on helping secure a competent workforce for Georgia's cities. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak to you today.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Noah. If you would please take a seat. Again, we'll wait questions to the end. And no stranger to any of us, Clint Mueller with ACCG, who will be our last presenter of the day.
See if I can get the presentation up here.
She's
there it
pulling
is.
it up. There you go.
There it is.
Go right ahead, Clint.
Right. Thank you, Chairman Albers, members of the Senate Study Committee. My name is Clint Mueller. I'm the Director of Governmental Affairs for the Association of County Commissioners of Georgia. We represent 159 county governments in the state of Georgia. We are your local arm for the state. I appreciate you giving us this opportunity to talk a little bit about some of the challenges and some of the ideas that we have that would help with our workforce. I don't have statistics or data for you today. I did a survey of our county managers, administrators across the state. That's where the information in this presentation came from. This is what they said that they're experiencing out there in the counties of our state. First, talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we're facing. Obviously, in the private sector, the flexibility, being able to work from home, flexible work schedules, those have become very popular recruiting tools. Unfortunately, in the public sector, especially in county government, most of our employees have to interface directly with the public. They don't have the police officers, firefighters. We can go down the list. They don't have the luxury of working from a computer at home. They don't have the luxury of coming in an hour late and staying an hour late. We have rigid schedules. They have to be, and that's making it a challenge, right? So the younger people that like that flexibility, that like being able to work from home, we can't offer them those types of jobs. Lack of skilled trades, we hear that over and over again. I'm sure you have too. A lot of our workforce at the county level of government requires skilled trades, and we're having a hard time recruiting those. In particular, one that was mentioned is we're having a hard time getting people that have CDL licenses. I'm sure that is across the board. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to some of the solutions. Lack of housing near employment, requiring longer commute times. So a lot of these jobs that are lower paying jobs, those people can't live in our communities, are living outside the communities and commuting in. So we're asking a lower paid employee to drive further, to spend more money on gas, to spend more time away from their families. We need more housing that they can afford to live in closer to those jobs. Goes along with less work-life balance. Obviously, if you're commuting many hours a day, you're not spending time with your family, and that lessens work-life balance. Fewer defined benefit plans offered in exchange for more profitable defined contribution plans. As you know, historically, government has had defined benefit plans, pension plans that have attracted people to come work for the public sector. We've gotten away from that. We hear all the time now that, you know, the 401A, 457B plans offered by county government are not really any better than what they could get in a 401K in the private sector. Therefore, that's not an attractive incentive to come work in the public sector anymore. Much smaller pool of applicants, especially for our department head positions. This goes back to what you've heard about lack of institutional knowledge. Historically, we had people that came up through the ranks before they got to the department head level, and they had already worked for the county government for 10 or 15 years. We're not seeing that anymore. So where do we get the talent to head up some of our departments? And again, the counties are very broad in what we do, from public works to the courts, to planning and zoning, to all the public safety disciplines. We have a wide range of department heads. And then last, more mental health assistance and EAP programs. So in particular, I wanted to mention public safety because that seems to be where we're having the worst shortage or the biggest challenges with trying to recruit people into the public safety disciplines. Obviously, in public safety, those that are working in those areas are having to work now more overtime because of the shortages. That's creating more burnout. We had a lot of burnout during the pandemic, especially with EMS and fire and law enforcement. And we're still suffering from that. A lot of people left the profession because of the burnout. We have a critical need for 911 dispatchers and paramedics in EMS. Quite frankly, especially in law enforcement, the threat of prosecution, that is a problem. People are putting their life on the line. They're having to make split-second life and death decisions. And at the same time, they're seeing that, hey, I could be prosecuted personally. I could lose my family. I could wind up have to give civil litigation because of what happened on the job. And so for those reasons, there's a lot more risk. And so for the pay, a lot of people are saying we don't want to take on that kind of additional risk. Young employees, as you know, will move for small salary increases. We're seeing a lot of competition between the state level of government within our counties and within our local governments, the cities, where we're basically trying to poach employees off one another. Obviously, the more urban counties that have larger resources, they can compete with the state and provide the same salaries that state employees have. Our rural counties cannot. Their tax base is not such that they can compete. Luckily, I think somebody mentioned earlier about people wanting to sometimes stay close to family, and that's a top criteria as to where people live and take jobs. That's helped us in the rural areas because a lot of these people are from the rural areas and they want to stay there because their families are there. But it's becoming harder and harder as people become more mobile and move around. It's harder to retain people in the rural counties based solely on family relationships. At some point in time, they're going to look at pay, they're going to look at benefits, and if we can't compete with the more urban counties in the state, they're going to move. Lack of funding and support for more youth programs to provide early exposure to public safety careers. You heard that today by others. We've got to expose people in K through 12 to jobs in the public sector and get them interested in taking those jobs at an early age. So some of the recommendations from the managers and administrators on the CDL, and I'm not familiar with this issue until it was brought to my attention, but apparently we have counties that used to train their people for the CDL license, and they no longer can do that. I believe there was a federal regulation change. Now there's they're saying they have to go through an 8-week course at the technical colleges, which I'm sure that's a good program, and I'm sure they're getting great experience doing that. But for some of our counties that used to do it in-house, they can no longer do it in-house. And they're saying, we felt like we had a pretty good in-house program that we can no longer, so it's taking them longer, I guess, to get people trained and to get that license. Going to the issue of having, especially young employees jumping from one department to another for a few $1,000s. I know with law enforcement in OCGA 358-22, there's a provision in there that if somebody leaves within, I think, 15 months or up to 2 years, they have to pay back some of the training costs and salary they received. That only applies to law enforcement. I know our firefighters, they would like to be included in that because we're seeing the same thing happen with our firefighters. They're jumping for just a few $1,000s. And so the counties that are investing in the training, I know that they can do contracts with the employees, but to have something in state law, I think would be very helpful to protect them for their investment they're making to train some of these new recruits. We have legislation that was introduced last year and again this year, providing PTSD insurance to first responders. We'll be pursuing that again next legislative session, but we think that's important. As I mentioned earlier with the burnout, we're seeing a lot of people in these career fields that are suffering from PTSD due to events that they experience on the job. And so we've worked with the Georgia Municipal Association and our insurance departments to put together an insurance program. We just need the legislation passed to give us the legal authorization to provide that. With EMS, this is sort of unique. This came from the fire chief in Cherokee County. As you know, Chairman Albers, in Cherokee County, they have a joint fire EMS. They cross-train. And we have that situation in a lot of counties across the state where they're cross-trained. So they do a lot of in-house training. Usually takes them about 11 weeks to get somebody trained. But they can't hire enough people in the EMS side of the house. And so they want to bring in people that already have the licensing for EMS. But to do that is problematic because they want to work the same hours that the firefighters work. Quite frankly, a lot of our firefighters, they're able to make ends meet by taking multiple jobs. They work for multiple departments. Sometimes they work a private sector job on top of their firefighter job. They're able to do that because of the work schedule. A lot of them are working 24-hour shifts, so they have time off to do other jobs. Well, EMS doesn't have the same flexibility because of the Fair Labor Standards Act. I know this is a federal issue, but our county managers would love to be able to include EMS in the same overtime scheme that we have for law enforcement and firefighters, where they can work within a longer time frame without hitting the 40-hour overtime requirements. And so we'd like to see EMS treated more like our firefighters in that regard, and we'd be able to attract more people into that that already have an EMS license without having to train them ourselves. More funding for workforce housing studies in communities. We have a few counties that are doing workforce housing studies right now, but I think that's become a hot topic the last few years with all the inflation in the housing market. We're going to need to do more in the way of studying what are our needs, what is the future workforce, what kind of living environment or they want to live in. We're seeing obviously everything trending towards rental. I think that's probably more by necessity than maybe what people actually want. Obviously, people starting out probably need to rent for a period of time, but we still think people have a long-term goal of home ownership, and we want to make that possible for people that do want to own their own homes in the community. We feel like they're more invested in the community when they own their own homes, but we're going in the wrong direction there, so we need to figure out ways to provide more home ownership opportunities. And then finally, find more incentives to entice retirees to come back to the workforce, at least part-time. We've got a lot of institutional knowledge, especially in government where it's important, that institutional knowledge that we've lost. And we just don't have the institutional knowledge coming up behind them. And so how can we attract some of these retirees to come back? So that's my presentation. Be happy. I know you're going to take questions, I think, from everybody. I don't know if you want us all to come up here or how do you want to handle that, but be happy to answer any questions.
Well, we'll have everybody on the ready. First, I want to thank you for your presentation and all three of you. You touched on something important that I'm obviously a passionate supporter of, which is public safety. Lance LaRusso is kind of a leading attorney that supports all those in public safety, and I've shared this with people before, but I want to share it again with everybody in the room. PTS, post-traumatic stress, is an event that you have in your life. Now, we hope it doesn't get to the D, which is a disorder, but it obviously has really become to the forefront for our soldiers over the last many decades now, our greatest heroes coming home, or what they experienced during combat or other related experiences they have. And if you think of PTS, that's what the average human goes through at some point of your life. In fact, the average person will have 4 major PTS events in your life that will affect you, and hopefully you're able to cope with those through help of family and friends, etc. A combat veteran who serves for a couple of years can have as many as 100 or 125. Anybody want to take a guess of what an average first responder, police, fire, emergency medical services, or 911 dispatcher has? 700. 700. And the impact to people from PTS, through heart disease, cancer, marriage, families, etc., is extraordinary. So I would like everybody to keep that in mind. It's not just a workforce issue, although it's a very important one. It is also an absolute necessity, because each one of us, no matter where we are, where we live, that is a critical part of our lives and livelihood. So thank you for bringing that up. Are there questions for either ACCG, GMA, or Department of Administrative Services of the state? Senator Hickman.
Thank you. I just want to make a comment. In this brochure here, it's perfect, y'all mentioned state report, and I reached out to the future and sent it to our city manager. And this is what he said. He said, thank you, the mayor and council committed to $35,000 a year for this 5-week program. We just finished our 3rd year, and we're looking forward to it. I read it again. So thank you, the mayor and council committed $35,000 a year for this 5-week program. We just finished our 3rd year, and we look forward to the 4th year. So that's one of the big problems I have with a lot of this is everybody wants the state of Georgia to pay for everything. I think a lot of times our city and counties have got to look at themselves in the mirror and say, this is our responsibility. We let these salaries get where they are. We should have increased people's salaries years ago. We know that there's a price, thank you. We know there's a price for living in our communities, and our people need to be willing to pay for that price. I know there's a price for living in a great city of Statesboro, Bullock County, and I'm willing to pay that price. And a lot of our leaders and our politicians have not stepped up to the bat over the years and passed these costs along, and consequently, we're paying city and county workers $10 an hour, but they go to Wendy's and make $15 an hour. That's the problem. The problem is not it just happened. It's been going on, but it's really all of a sudden now hit the wall, and it's all of our fault. It's not just a situation. It's all of our fault. And I think we really need to look in the mirror at the cities and counties and say, what can we do to correct this, and not ask the state for money all the time to correct it. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Other questions or comments for our 3 panels? All right. Well, on that high note, thank you, Senator. Thank you all very much. Great presentations. For those here on the committee, we are going to have a lunch in the same room that we met in earlier this morning, followed by those who can stay for the tour of Kia. Thank you, Stuart and team. There's going to be a shuttle that is going to leave at 12:45. So please be prepared to get on the shuttle if you're going over the tour. The tour is going to begin promptly at 1 o'clock. A reminder, our next committee meeting is going to be in Commerce, just outside of SK Innovations' large facility on September the 19th. You've got to see the website up. One of the key components of that website is to make sure we hear from everybody. There's only a certain amount of time we can have for people to come make presentations, but everyone has a chance to have their voice heard. So you can go on and you can submit your testimony. You can write it in there. You can email it to us. All of that's being assembled. I want to thank Haley and our Senate research team for the work they're doing for absorbing all this information, making sure that all the committee members have access to that, and that will be a part of our final report as well as recommendations. Again, want to thank Lieutenant Governor's Office, the Senate Press Office, the Senate Research Office, our Legislative Council, and all of the support staff. Thank you, Allison, for your first study committee. And to all those who came to speak today, greatly appreciate you taking your time out of your busy schedules representing, whether it be the counties, the cities, our state, your private marketplace, or great initiatives in the construction industry and others in order to try to improve, as well as those in our special needs community in order to have a fulfilling role for them in our lives, but also to fill those important gaps we have in the workforce. We are blessed by your presence here at our committee today. We thank you for the opportunity, and this meeting is hereby adjourned. Have a great day.